The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before Maria, her arms burning as she carried her 8-year-old brother Carlos, his fevered body limp against her chest. 3 hours they'd been waiting, 3 hours of watching other families get called before them, while Carlos's breathing grew more labored. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, and somewhere behind the reception desk a phone rang unanswered. Maria's legs trembled, but she refused to set him down on the dirty floor where someone had spilled coffee and never bothered to clean it up. That's when the automatic doors whooshed open, and everything changed. If you're watching this story unfold and feeling that same helpless frustration Maria felt, hit that subscribe button right now, because you're about to witness something that'll restore your faith in humanity. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and smash that hype button, because this story is about to take a turn that'll leave you speechless. The woman who walked through those doors moved differently than everyone else. Confident, purposeful, like she owned every space she entered. Maria recognized her immediately, that distinctive walk, those shoulders that had carried the weight of championship belts, the face that had graced magazine covers and movie screens. Ronda Rousey, former UFC champion, Hollywood actress, living legend. But here, at 2:47 a.m. in a crowded emergency room in downtown Los Angeles, she was just another person seeking medical attention, a small bandage wrapped around her left hand. Ronda's eyes swept the waiting room, taking in the chaos with the same analytical precision she'd once used to size up opponents in the octagon. Crying babies, exhausted parents, elderly patients slumped in uncomfortable plastic chairs. Her gaze stopped on Maria, this teenage girl swaying on her feet, clutching a small boy whose skin had taken on an alarming grayish pallor. "How long have you been waiting?" Ronda's voice cut through the ambient noise, direct and uncompromising. Maria looked up, startled. Up close, Ronda was smaller than she appeared on television, but there was an intensity in her eyes that made the air around her feel charged. 3 hours, Maria whispered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "They keep saying someone will see him soon, but what's wrong with him? High fever, trouble breathing. Started this afternoon, but it got worse after dinner. My mum's working a double shift, and I couldn't wait." Maria's words tumbled out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for hours. "I took 2 buses to get here, and they won't even look at him because we don't have insurance cards with us." Ronda's jaw tightened. She'd grown up poor, knew what it felt like to be invisible in places where money talked louder than suffering. Without a word, she walked to the reception desk, her presence immediately commanding attention from the tired-looking nurse who'd been ignoring Maria's increasingly desperate pleas. "Excuse me." Ronda's tone was polite, but carried an undertone that suggested politeness was optional. "That little boy over there needs to be seen immediately." The nurse looked up, recognition flickering across her features. "Ma'am, we have protocols. Everyone has to wait their turn, and without proper documentation..." "I'll handle the documentation." Ronda pulled out her phone, speed-dialing a number. "Dr. Martinez, it's Ronda. I'm at General Hospital downtown, and there's a child here who needs immediate attention. Yes, I'll take full responsibility. Room 7, perfect." She ended the call and turned back to the nurse, whose expression had shifted from dismissive to accommodating with remarkable speed. "Dr. Martinez will see the boy in room 7, now." Maria watched this exchange with growing amazement. In less than 2 minutes, Ronda had accomplished what she'd been trying to do for 3 hours. But as they walked toward the examination room, Maria noticed something that made her stomach clench with new worry. "I can't pay for this," she said quietly. "Whatever this costs, we don't have already handled." Ronda held the door open, and Maria carried Carlos inside, finally able to set him down on the clean examination table. "Dr. Martinez is a friend. He owes me a favor." But that wasn't entirely true. Ronda had met Dr. Martinez exactly once, at a charity event 6 months ago. She was banking on his professionalism and her celebrity status to smooth the way, knowing she'd figure out the payment details later. What mattered now was getting this child the care he needed. Dr. Martinez arrived within minutes, a tall man with kind eyes and steady hands. As he examined Carlos, asking Maria questions about symptoms and timeline, Ronda found herself studying the girl more closely. 16, maybe 17 years old, wearing clothes that had been washed so many times the colors had faded to ghosts of their original hues. Her sneakers had holes near the toes, carefully covered with duct tape. But her posture was straight, her voice clear when answering the doctor's questions, pride and desperation warring in every gesture. Pneumonia, Dr. Martinez announced after completing his examination. Early stage, but it needs immediate treatment. We'll need to admit him for at least 48 hours, maybe longer depending on how he responds to antibiotics. Maria's face went white. Admit him? But we can't. I mean, the cost. Insurance will cover it, Ronda said smoothly, though she had no idea how she was going to make that true. Don't worry about anything except getting him better. As the medical team prepared Carlos for admission, wheeling him toward the elevator, Maria grabbed Ronda's arm. Why are you doing this? You don't even know us. Ronda paused, memories flooding back unbidden. She was 7 years old again, sitting in a similar hospital waiting room with her mother, watching her little sister struggle with asthma while they waited for someone, anyone, to help. Her mother had been too proud to ask for charity, too poor to demand better treatment. They'd waited 4 hours that night, 4 hours that felt like forever, until a doctor finally took pity on them. Because someone should have done it for my family once and nobody did. The words came out rougher than she intended, carrying more emotion than she usually allowed herself to show in public. Over the next 2 days, Ronda found herself returning to the hospital more often than she'd planned. She told herself it was just to check on the boy's progress, but the truth was more complicated. There was something about Maria's fierce protectiveness, her refusal to break down even when everything seemed hopeless, that reminded Ronda of herself at that age. On the second evening, she arrived to find Maria asleep in the chair beside Carlos's bed, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, one hand still resting protectively on her brother's arm. Carlos was awake, his fever finally broken, color returning to his cheeks. "The lady who helped us," he whispered when he saw Ronda. "Maria said you're famous." "Not as famous as I used to be," Ronda replied, settling into the other chair. "How are you feeling?" "Better. Maria's been here the whole time. She won't go home, even though the nurses said she could." Carlos's voice was still weak, but his eyes were bright and alert. "She does that, takes care of everyone. What about your parents?" "Mom works 3 jobs. Dad left when I was little." Carlos said this matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "Maria's going to be a doctor someday. She's really smart, but she had to drop out of school to work when I got sick the first time." The first time. Ronda felt something cold settle in her stomach. "This has happened before." "Couple times, but never this bad." Carlos glanced at his sleeping sister. "She sold her car to pay for medicine last time. Now she takes the bus everywhere, even when it's dangerous." Ronda studied Maria's face in the dim light, filtering through the hospital room window. Even in sleep, there were worry lines around her eyes, premature for someone so young. Her clothes were clean but worn, and Ronda noticed the careful way she'd positioned herself to hide the holes in her jeans. The next morning brought unexpected complications. Dr. Martinez pulled Ronda aside with news that made her blood pressure spike. "The insurance information you provided didn't go through," he said quietly. "The billing department is asking questions, and hospital administration is getting involved. They want to speak with you about payment arrangements." Ronda had been dreading this moment. In her rush to help, she'd made promises she couldn't keep, at least not through conventional channels. The hospital bill would easily reach $15,000, maybe more. She had the money, but paying it outright would raise questions she wasn't prepared to answer, especially with her financial advisors already questioning her recent charitable spending. How much time do I have? They want answers by end of business today. If we can't resolve the payment issue, they'll have to transfer Carlos to County General. Dr. Martinez's expression was apologetic but firm. I'm sorry, Ronda. I tried to buy you more time, but my hands are tied. County General. Ronda knew what that meant. Overcrowded wards, overworked staff, the kind of place where a sick child could easily fall through the cracks. The thought of Carlos being moved there, of Maria having to navigate that system alone, made her chest tight with anger. She spent the morning making phone calls, trying to find a solution that wouldn't involve her writing a personal check for the full amount. Her publicist suggested turning it into a publicity opportunity, arranging for cameras to capture her generous donation to help a needy family. Her business manager recommended finding a charity to funnel the payment through, making it tax-deductible. But every option felt wrong, like she was trying to profit from Maria's desperation. This wasn't about publicity or tax breaks. This was about a 17-year-old girl who'd carried her sick brother through the night because she had nowhere else to turn. At 3 p.m., with the deadline approaching, Ronda made a decision that surprised even herself. She walked into the hospital billing office and wrote a personal check for the full amount. No publicity, no fanfare, no tax benefits. Just one human being helping another. I'll need a receipt, she told the surprised billing clerk. And I want this kept confidential. No press releases, no social media posts, nothing. As she walked back toward Carlos's room, Ronda felt lighter than she had in months. The money was significant. Enough to buy a nice car or fund a small vacation. But it was also just money. What she'd gained was harder to quantify, but infinitely more valuable. She found Maria in the hallway, pacing nervously while Carlos underwent his final examination before discharge. "Doctor, Martinez said there might be a problem with payment," Maria said without preamble. "If you can't help anymore, I understand. You've already done so much, and I can figure something out. Maybe I can set up a payment plan or—" "It's handled," Ronda interrupted. "Everything's paid for. Carlos can go home today." Maria stared at her for a long moment, emotions cycling across her face too quickly to track. "I don't understand. How is it handled? The nurse said the bill was over $15,000. It doesn't matter how. What matters is that your brother is healthy and you can both go home." Ronda kept her voice steady, but inside she was fighting her own emotional response to the gratitude she saw building in Maria's eyes. "I can't accept this. It's too much. I have to pay you back somehow." "You want to pay me back?" Ronda pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. "Finish school. Become that doctor your brother talked about. Help other families who end up in situations like this." She paused, then added more quietly, "And maybe someday, when you see someone who needs help and you're in a position to give it, remember this moment." 3 months later, Ronda received an unexpected package at her home address. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small framed photograph. The letter was from Maria, written on school letterhead. She'd re-enrolled and was catching up on her missed credits. The photograph showed Carlos at a soccer game, healthy and grinning, holding a trophy. "Dear Ronda," the letter began, "I wanted you to know that Carlos made the school soccer team and is doing great in all his classes. The doctors say his lungs are completely clear, and he hasn't had any breathing problems since that night. I'm back in school and working part-time at a medical clinic downtown. The doctor there is teaching me about patient care, and I'm learning so much. I think about what you did for us every day, and I promise I'll find a way to pass it forward. You saved more than just Carlos that night. You saved our whole family's future. I hope someday I can be half as strong as you are." Ronda read the letter 3 times before setting it down on her kitchen counter. Outside her window, Los Angeles stretched endlessly in all directions, millions of people living their lives, facing their own struggles, carrying their own burdens. Somewhere out there, Maria was studying for exams, and Carlos was kicking soccer balls, and their mother was working her 3 jobs, probably still unaware of exactly how close they'd come to losing everything that night. The story could have ended there, a neat conclusion tied up with gratitude and good intentions. But life rarely offers such clean resolutions, and 6 months after that letter arrived, Ronda found herself back in a hospital waiting room, this time as a patient rather than a rescuer. The injury was minor, a torn ligament from an overly ambitious workout, but the MRI appointment had been delayed, leaving her with unexpected time to sit and observe. The waiting room looked exactly like the one where she'd first encountered Maria and Carlos, down to the flickering fluorescent light and the coffee stain on the floor that no one ever seemed to clean. That's when she saw them. A young father, maybe 25 years old, holding a toddler who was clearly running a high fever. The man's clothes were paint-stained, his hands rough from manual labor, his face etched with the same desperate worry Ronda had seen on Maria's face that night. He'd been waiting for over 2 hours. She learned from eavesdropping on his increasingly frustrated conversations with the reception staff. "Sir, without insurance verification, we can't guarantee when the doctor will be available," the nurse was saying, her tone professionally sympathetic but ultimately unhelpful. Ronda watched the man's shoulders sag, saw him look down at his sick child with the expression of someone who was running out of options. She thought about Maria's letter, about promises to pass kindness forward, about the ripple effects of a single moment of compassion. Without overthinking it, she stood up and walked to the reception desk. "Excuse me," she said to the nurse, her voice carrying that same quiet authority she'd used months ago. "That gentleman and his daughter need to be seen immediately." The nurse looked up, recognition dawning. "Ms. Rousey, I didn't realize you were here. Of course we can—" "Not for me." "For them," Ronda nodded toward the father and child, "and I'll handle any payment issues." As she made the phone call to Dr. Martinez, as she watched the relief flood across the young father's face, as she settled into the familiar rhythm of advocating for someone who couldn't advocate for themselves, Ronda realized something profound had shifted in her understanding of strength. For years, she'd defined strength in terms of physical dominance, the ability to impose her will on opponents through superior technique and conditioning. But sitting in that hospital waiting room, watching a sick child receive the care she needed because someone with resources chose to use them compassionately, Ronda understood that real strength wasn't about what you could take from the world. It was about what you could give back to it. The father's name was David, and his daughter Emma was suffering from the same pneumonia that had nearly claimed Carlos. As Emma received treatment, David told Ronda about his wife's recent death, about trying to raise a toddler alone while working construction jobs that barely covered rent, about the constant fear that one medical emergency would destroy everything he'd worked to build. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, echoing Maria's words from months earlier. "This would have bankrupted us." "You don't need to thank me," Ronda replied, and meant it. "Just take care of your daughter. That's all any of us can do, take care of each other." But David surprised her with his response. "My wife used to volunteer at a free clinic before she got sick. She always said that helping people was the only thing that really mattered in life. I stopped believing that after she died, thought the world was just too hard, and people were just too selfish." He looked at his daughter, sleeping peacefully now that her fever had broken. "You reminded me that she was right." 6 weeks later, Ronda received another letter, this one from David. He'd started volunteering at the same free clinic where his wife had worked, using his construction skills to help with building maintenance and repairs. The clinic served families who couldn't afford traditional medical care. People like Maria and Carlos, like David and Emma, like Rhonda's own family had been all those years ago. "The clinic is always looking for funding," David wrote. "I know you've already done so much, but if you ever want to see where your kindness leads, you should come visit us. You'd be amazed at how many people we're able to help." Rhonda did visit, and she was amazed. The clinic operated out of a converted warehouse in East LA, staffed by volunteer doctors and nurses who donated their time to serve the community. The waiting room was crowded but organized, filled with families who might otherwise have nowhere to turn for medical care. Dr. Martinez was there, she discovered, volunteering 2 evenings a week. "Funny how things work out," he said when he saw her. "That night with Carlos and Maria got me thinking about why I became a doctor in the first place. This feels more like real medicine than anything I do at the hospital." As Rhonda toured the facility, meeting volunteers and patients, she began to understand the true scope of what her single act of kindness had set in motion. Maria was there too, now a senior in high school and volunteering as a translator for Spanish-speaking families. Carlos had started a soccer program for kids in the neighborhood, using sports as a way to keep children engaged and healthy. "It's like you threw a stone in a pond," Maria explained, as they watched Carlos coaching a group of 8-year-olds. "The ripples just keep spreading." That evening, as Rhonda drove home through the sprawling city, she thought about ripples and stones, and the unexpected ways that strength could manifest in the world. Her fighting career had brought her fame and fortune, but it had also been fundamentally about defeating others, about proving her superiority through controlled violence. This was different. This was about building something instead of tearing it down, about using her resources and influence to create opportunities rather than eliminate opponents. It was a kind of strength she'd never learned in any gym or training facility, but it felt more powerful than any submission hold she'd ever mastered. The call came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in December, jarring Rhonda from deep sleep. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar but urgent. "Ms. Rousey, this is Dr. Chen at Children's Hospital. I'm calling about Maria Gonzalez. She listed you as an emergency contact." Rhonda was instantly awake, her heart racing. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She was in a car accident earlier tonight. She's stable, but she's asking for you. Her brother is here too, and they don't have any other family in the area." Rhonda was dressed and in her car within 10 minutes, driving through empty streets toward the hospital, where this whole journey had begun. She found Carlos in the waiting room, no longer the sick 8-year-old she'd first met, but a healthy 12-year-old trying very hard not to cry. "She was coming home from work," he explained, his voice shaky. "Someone ran a red light and hit her car. The doctors say she's going to be okay, but she has a broken leg and some other injuries." No, when Rhonda finally saw Maria, lying in a hospital bed with her leg elevated and bandages covering various cuts and bruises, she was struck by how young she still looked, despite everything she'd been through. Maria was 19 now, a sophomore in college studying pre-med, but in the harsh hospital lighting she seemed fragile and vulnerable. "You came," Maria said, her voice thick with pain medication, but her eyes bright with relief. "Of course I came. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck, which I guess I basically did." Maria attempted a smile, then winced as the movement pulled at her stitches. "The doctors say I'll be fine, but I'll need surgery on my leg and then physical therapy, and I'm supposed to stay off it for at least 6 weeks. Rhonda saw the fear behind Maria's attempt at humor. 6 weeks without work meant 6 weeks without income, and college students living paycheck to paycheck couldn't afford that kind of interruption. "Don't worry about work," Rhonda said. "Focus on getting better. Everything else can be figured out." But Maria shook her head. "I can't keep letting you solve my problems. I'm an adult now. I need to handle this myself." "You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to help because I care about you and Carlos. There's a difference." Onutedu. Over the following weeks, as Maria recovered from her surgery and began the slow process of physical therapy, Ronda found herself thinking more deeply about the nature of independence and interdependence. Maria's fierce desire to be self-sufficient was admirable, but it was also limiting. She was so focused on not being a burden that she sometimes refused help, even when accepting it would benefit everyone involved. It was Carlos who finally broke through his sister's stubborn pride. "Maria," he said one afternoon as Ronda helped him with homework while Maria rested on the couch, "remember what you always tell me about soccer? That the best players aren't the ones who try to do everything themselves. They're the ones who know when to pass the ball to someone who's in a better position to score." Maria looked at her little brother with surprise and something that might have been pride. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from watching you. And from watching Ronda. She's really good at knowing when to pass the ball." That night, after Carlos had gone to bed, Maria and Ronda sat on the small balcony outside Maria's apartment, looking out over the city lights. "I've been thinking about what Carlos said," Maria began, "about passing the ball. I think I've been so afraid of being dependent on other people that I forgot how to be interdependent with them. What's the difference? Dependence is when you can't function without someone else's help. Interdependence is when you choose to work together because you're stronger as a team." Maria shifted her injured leg, finding a more comfortable position. "I want to be part of your team, not just someone you rescue." "What does that look like?" Maria was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. "The clinic where I volunteer, they need more funding to expand their services. And I have ideas about how to reach more families, how to make healthcare more accessible in underserved communities. But I need someone with resources and connections to help make those ideas reality." "I'm listening." "What if we started a foundation together? Not just you writing checks, but both of us working to create systemic change. You bring the resources and the platform, I bring the community knowledge and the medical training I'm getting. We could fund clinics, provide scholarships for students from low-income families who want to go into healthcare, create programs that address the root causes of health disparities." Ronda felt something click into place, like a puzzle piece she hadn't known was missing. A foundation built on the idea that everyone deserves access to quality healthcare, regardless of their ability to pay. Exactly. And we could call it the Ripple Foundation because of what you said about throwing stones in ponds. I never said that. You did. Did I? Maria laughed. Well, whoever said it, it's true. Small acts of kindness create ripples that spread farther than we can imagine. The Ripple Foundation officially launched 18 months later, with Maria as its program director and Ronda as its primary funder and public face. Their first initiative was to establish 3 free clinics in underserved areas of Los Angeles, staffed by volunteer medical professionals and funded through a combination of private donations and corporate partnerships. The launch event was held at the original clinic where David volunteered, the converted warehouse that had become a symbol of community-driven healthcare. The room was packed with families who had been helped by the clinic, medical professionals who donated their time, and community leaders who supported the Foundation's mission. Ronda stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, and realized that this moment felt more significant than any championship victory she'd ever achieved. This wasn't about defeating an opponent. It was about building something that would outlast any individual achievement. 3 years ago, she began, I walked into a hospital emergency room and saw a teenage girl carrying her sick brother, waiting for someone to help them. I had no idea that helping them would change my life more than it changed theirs. She found Maria in the crowd, sitting with Carlos, who was now 15 and had grown tall and confident, his soccer trophies replaced by academic awards and volunteer certificates. I learned that night that real strength isn't about what you can take from the world. It's about what you can give back to it. And I learned that the most powerful thing any of us can do is to see someone who needs help and choose to provide it. Not because we expect anything in return, but because we're all connected in ways we don't always understand. The applause was warm and sustained, but Rhonda barely heard it. She was thinking about ripples and stones, about the unpredictable ways that kindness multiplied and spread, about the difference between strength that destroyed and strength that built. After the event, as volunteers cleaned up and families headed home, Rhonda found herself alone with Maria and Carlos in the clinic's main examination room. "Do you ever think about that night?" Carlos asked. "The night you first helped us?" "All the time," Rhonda admitted. "It was the night I learned what I was really supposed to be doing with my life." "What were you supposed to be doing before that?" Maria asked. Rhonda considered the question seriously. "Winning, I guess. Proving I was the best, the strongest, the most dominant. But that's a pretty limited way to define success. And now? Now I think success is measured by how many people you help become the best versions of themselves, how many ripples you create, how much stronger you make the world around you." Carlos grinned. "That's a much better definition." As they walked out of the clinic together, past the walls covered with thank you letters and children's drawings, past the reception desk where families would come tomorrow seeking help and finding it, Rhonda felt a deep sense of completion. Not the kind of completion that came from finishing a fight or winning a championship, but the kind that came from knowing you'd found your true purpose. The story of that night in the emergency room had become legend in their circle, told and retold at foundation events and volunteer gatherings. But for Rhonda, it wasn't a story at all. It was a beginning, the first chapter in a life redefined by service rather than conquest. Outside, the Los Angeles night was warm and clear, the city lights stretching endlessly in all directions. Somewhere out there, families were struggling with medical bills they couldn't afford. Children were getting sick while their parents worked multiple jobs. Teenagers were carrying burdens too heavy for their young shoulders. But somewhere out there, too, volunteers were staffing free clinics. Doctors were donating their time. Communities were coming together to care for their most vulnerable members. The ripples were spreading just as Maria had predicted, creating waves of compassion that would reach shores none of them could imagine. And if you're watching this story unfold, feeling inspired by the power of one person's choice to help another, remember that you have that same power. Every day, in small ways and large ones, you have the opportunity to be someone's Ronda Rousey, to see suffering and choose to alleviate it, to use whatever resources you have, time, money, skills, connections, to make someone else's burden a little lighter. The ripples you create today might reach farther than you'll ever know, touching lives and changing futures in ways that echo through generations.